Cead Fáilte. 1,000 welcomes to Crann Short Stories and Poetry for July 19th. I'm Terrance Ó Domhnaill, your village scéalaí, back again this week with more stories and poems from authors around the world. I just have 4 short stories and 1 poem for you. I have the last chapter of From Beyond the Water Wall, a short horror story, 2 science fiction shorts, and a poem about a star. So gather around once more and let me read them to you under the shade of the crown of beatha, the tree of life. First is the last chapter, From Beyond the Water Wall, chapter 25, by Don Woodby. This is published in the Fiction Writer's Den. Previously, Mars, Wren, and the others finally defeated all the enemies. Spike was killed in the exchange. Do you think more soldiers will come? Wren asked as Mars struggled to sit up. I believe it, yeah, he said between one gasp and another. Somewhat far away from them, Abby stood by the fisherman. He sat in silence, looking away. Did I hear it right? Mars asked. Was that guy really his brother? Wren sighed. I think so. It's all messed up. He cleaned a small line of blood from her cheek. Did you get hurt? She glanced back at the soldier with the carved knife in his eye. I'm not even sure it's mine. Are you okay? She nodded and shrugged. I think my gun jammed. Only the blade worked. Mars dragged himself to a wall and leaned on it. It can happen. You have to do this to get it back going. She hit the gun twice with the palm of her hand, making him wince with the impact. The blade contracted inside the weapon, and she set it back to 2. It will work normally again, she said. Maybe I should have shown that to you before. Mars smiled. It would have been a great help, yeah. Abby sat on the ground beside the fisherman. He leaned on her chest and looked at his brother. Do you think Trench is going to be able to lead the boat out of the country? Mars asked. Not sure. Probably. She made it as if she were about to speak, but stopped, looked up and around for a moment, and she said, I don't think I will go with the fisherman. Mars lifted his eyebrows and looked at her in the eyes. Somehow he didn't feel surprised with what she said. His arm felt slightly better. The pain wasn't nearly as bad as it was before, and he could move it again. He held her hand. I can't stay here anymore, she said. Even if I go out of the country, you won't be there. What are you going to do? I can't go with you, trust me. I wish I could, but I don't belong there. You have your wife and you have your child. There is no place for me. Ares approached them limping. The tension was broken by the image of the mighty wolf showing his tongue and waving the tail as if he were a hungry dog. Mars didn't need to answer, at least. Nothing he could say would be better than silence. He looked at Wren for a moment, widening his eyes to prevent a tear from coming out. He kissed her forehead and asked, So what are you going to do then? I'll find some other place, behind one of those waterfalls. There must be a nice world. Maybe I can even meet you in one of them. Mars stood up, smiling. He looked at the fisherman and Abby and thought back to the last days and the struggle they'd been through. He then looked at Spike lying dead on the floor. At least he got his revenge, a luxury these days. I'm not good at goodbyes, he said. Tell Abby and Trench I'm grateful and that I wish all the best for them. He slowly walked toward the river. The clear water was tainted by the blood washing away from his body. He glanced back, gawked into Wren's teary eyes, and mouthed the words, Thank you. Mars half swam across the river toward the waterfall. Struggling, he climbed the rocks and hesitated for a moment. He looked back at Wren again. She sauntered beside Ares, who seemed fully recovered. The bullet probably only grazed him, he thought to himself as he put his arms inside the waterfall as if opening a curtain. He let himself fall into it, and it all became dark. He felt as if he floated around in a pool, not cold or warm, no current, nothing. Meanwhile, Wren approached Abby and Trench. I can't even get close to imagine what you're feeling now, but it will pass, she told him. She hugged Abby and explained why she would not be going with them. I kind of thought Gavin would be here, Abby said. The rat has always been too much of a coward to come and fight, though. Wren shrugged and smiled, not knowing what to say. She felt peaceful, though. Everyone in charge was gone. Her job was done. She could finally move on. Wren embraced Abby again and turned around. Maybe we'll meet each other again, she said as Wren walked away. Let's go, boy, Wren shouted, and the wolf followed by her side. She checked inside the bag to make sure Hades was still fine, slightly terrified, but alive. She peered around, trying to decide which way to take. She didn't know exactly why, but one specific waterfall had a pattern of rocks leading up to it. The path looked like a fallen ladder, and that caught her attention. Might as well be this one, she thought to herself. What do you think? Will this one do? An acute pain ran through Mar's head. As if reaching the end of a tunnel, a frail light beam met his eyes. It slowly became wider until it blinded him for a moment. He didn't notice when he touched the ground again. Confused, as if waking up after a long trip, the image of the wrecked ship was the first thing he saw. His wife, this time was really her, and Woo-Woo hid behind a set of rocks. The three men, the same he had confronted before, the same who shot him and sent him beyond the waterfall, crept toward his family. Mars turned to them and aimed. Wren glanced at him, giving away his position, and they turned around. They stopped for a second and stood paralyzed, perhaps because of the gun in place of his arm, or maybe because they had, shortly before, witnessed him falling behind the waterfall. Shots were fired as Mars tried to take cover. His shoulder bounced up and down, and he could feel the muscles tearing apart. He hid behind a set of rocks and aimed at the assailants. Wren's trick had worked after all. He emptied his gun. There was no need for more. They all lay dead on the ground. Wren snatched Woo-Woo's hand and rushed toward Mars. She rubbed her eyes as she came closer and looked down at the gun on his arm. He embraced her tightly and kissed her lips. People began to leave the ship. They were safe for now. Rescue would hopefully arrive soon. What is that?" she asked, pointing at his arm. "I have a lot to tell you." So that's the end of that serialized story. I hope you liked it. I'm working on getting some more for you. I've got some stuff coming up from some Substack writers here soon. So my next story is called Cape Cod, 1942. It's called a horror fiction by V. Plut, published in Lark Publication. He painted the sea and the sailing vessels surrounding his perch on a Cape Cod cliff. The wind was always a nuisance, rattling his canvas and shaking his little pot of turpentine, so that he built a type of adjustable frame onto his easel to hold the canvas in place. He reinforced the entire setup by tying bags of sand to the legs. He painted the fog on mornings when it settled heavily over the cliff, obscuring his view of the sea, and he painted clear skies on sunny days over a calm, shimmering horizon. When the wind made its way to the cliff, unhindered by the large, roiling ocean waves across the landscape before him, and when the sky filled with swift clouds shape-shifting from gray to black, then to glowing pink in the evening, he painted. He packed his lunch on most days, since his wife was a busy painter, preferring the warmth of her studio upstairs to the scraggy brush and bramble of coastal nature outdoors. When they went in en plein air together on little road trips, she painted from inside the car, unless calm winds prevailed, in which case she would find a shady spot away from the weeds and tall grass. She painted from within the tall shade of her husband's fame and fortune, at times letting slip her resentment at his success, usually during their most volatile arguments about financial and domestic affairs. She couldn't slip from under the darkness he cast over her art. How could she see the way an artist should when he blocked her sun? Most of her mornings were spent carefully documenting his paintings, corresponding with everyone from clients to agents to journalists, tracking financial transactions and paying bills. All the while he worked at the edge of the cliff as distant from her as the other side of his beloved sea. She painted in her studio in the afternoons, her work piling up on shelves and against the wall without an audience, despite the fact that through him she had access to some of the biggest art dealers in New York City. Her resentment of her husband's success was expressed at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all of which she refused to cook or serve. Each cooked her meals and ate in their respective studios. It was in the summer of 1941 when things began to break. A teacup bequeathed to him by his mother was found on the dining room floor early one morning as he brought his coffee from the kitchen. It was closed up tightly in the hutch cabinet the day before. The model clipper ship he put together as a boy took a bad fall in his studio late one night. A small vase he collected while spending time as a young painter in Paris seemed to slide out the fireplace mantel as he woke from a Sunday afternoon nap. His wife was dozing upstairs, came down to investigate the shattering noise. "Oh my," she said, "seems you're having a run of bad luck this summer, what with your mother's cup and your little ship, and now this. The universe is raining down on Cape Cod from above just for your sake. Seems as if it's out to get you this summer. It is said that these things happen in threes. Hopefully, that's the end of it. Merely coincidence, he replied, and only things. They'll mean nothing after I'm gone. It's my paintings that the world will find dear. She raised her chin high. I feel the same about my own work. When I'm gone, they will see what a contribution I made. He glanced briefly at her and smirked. The contribution you made to the Sunday painters of the world who dream and pretend. Every flea market and garage sale is filled with paltry, pretentious attempts at real art. I work as hard as you at it. You're only recognized because I put my own work aside to promote you. I should leave and put the time and energy into my work rather than yours. It would be just a matter of time before my work would make you an obscure footnote in the history of American art. She swallowed her anger again as he walked into his studio and closed the door. It would just be a matter of time, she thought. Soon she would be recognized and released from his cruel hold on her artistic sensibilities. December of that year saw the attack on Pearl Harbor. He joined the Ground Observer Corps and volunteered as a lookout at the Cape since he was too old to serve in another capacity. He could watch for enemy planes or submarines as he painted in the unlikely event that the Japanese attacked again on the East Coast. He kept a radio in a small shed near the cliff in case he needed to call the authorities. When the spring of '42 brought warmth to the Cape, he went out to the shed to ready his outdoor easel for another season of work. His wife had slept like a bear all winter, not once lashing out in her sleep. His most cherished items were still somehow falling out of cupboards and off of shelves throughout the winter, and he suspected his wife for a while, but she was always sleeping as usual. He began moving his things to sturdy and level areas of the house, but they still managed to crash and break. Something was very different in her waking tone as well. No more sarcastic comments. In fact, they barely exchanged words at all, not even to argue, and she took lots of naps in the afternoons. It was as though she had found another outlet for her resentment of him. He went up to her studio one afternoon as she napped and cracked open her door just enough to see a blank canvas on her easel. He felt light and energized as he walked down the path to the cliff, and his head was filled with ideas and sketches for the coming summer, while she moped in her studio without inspiration. But that was her typical emergent behavior in spring. He went through this every year, but this year was different. He no longer worried about her up in her rooms, wasting her life dreaming of being him. She was a silly, hysterical woman, and he no longer cared for anything now except painting the seas and sails. His wife be damned. He checked the radio to be sure it was ready, then turned to pull brushes and turpentine from a small cupboard when he heard a loud snapping noise behind him. He twisted around quickly to find that the frame on his handmade adjustable easel had cracked in two pieces. Probably expanded and warped from being left in the shed all winter, he thought. He would have to do without for now. The skies were clear, and a small windmill he built at the edge of the cliff was moving at a snail's pace. He grabbed a spare French pochade box filled with paints, brushes, and a jar of turpentine, and set off to the cliff with a fresh canvas. She slept in, and when she went down for coffee about 10 a.m., he was gone. She walked into his studio and looked out the gigantic north-facing window down the path to the cliff beyond. His red and black checked flannel shirt between the shed and the windmill was visible among the spring grass. He was already at work, she thought. He would be at it till late evening at least, perhaps squeezing in one more canvas when the sun began to set eastward over the ocean. She sat at his desk in his studio and began her morning accounting of bills and paperwork. She worked for 4 hours straight, even through lunch, until it was time to go upstairs and stand in front of her blank canvas for the 4th day in a row. Today will bring some inspiration, she thought, but she stood again with a blank mind before a blank canvas until she finally lay on the sofa in her studio, drifting in and out of a nap. The dream was her own, but she was him, on the cliff, sizing up the horizon, mixing ultramarine blue and white and a touch of alizarin crimson for the sky. Some yellow ochre, viridian green, cerulean blue, cadmium red, and yellow lay before him on the wooden pallet. It was just a small dot above the horizon at first. He thought it was a bird, but it grew larger, and he could hear the faint sound of an engine. It was a plane. Its engine seemed to pick up speed and sound. The nose was black and pointing directly inland. He grabbed his binoculars for a closer look. He took note of the cadmium yellow stripes on the dark green wings and the dark figure of the pilot through the glass. The plane was well covered at the last GOC meeting. A6M0. He dropped his binoculars and shouted, "My God, a Zeke!" Just as he moved for the shed, the plane bore down on him and began to fire. He jumped forward into the scrub grass with his hands over his head. His canvas was riddled with holes, and his pochade collapsed in a heap. He was running up the small hill to the shed as it came around again, and when it dipped, he could see the cadmium red of the sign of the rising sun on the top of the wing. He made it into the shed and headed for the radio, but the Zero flew in directly above and rained the open door with fire, tearing up his cabinets and leaving a red mess of his life on his newly gossoed canvas nearby. She woke with a start and a moaning sound that echoed up into her conscious mind from far away, just as the Zero was pulling out of the nosedive and beginning to ascend. What a horrible nightmare, she thought, the most lucid, colorful dream of my life. She sat on the edge of the couch in her studio for about 10 minutes, her heart still racing to take her breath away. When she pulled herself together, she realized she had slept till nearly 9 p.m. When she went downstairs for a snack, the house was dark, with a faint twilight outlining the windows. She went into his studio. It was empty. She ran to a door leading out of his studio, grabbing one of his spring jackets on a hook. She fumbled in the dark for a flashlight and hurried down the path. His pochade was tipped on its side, and his painting lay face down in the grass. She hurried to the shed and found him on his back with the radio on top of him. His fingers were wrapped around the speakerphone. By 10 a.m., the reporters, clients, and admirers were calling. She related the story over and over. Yes, that's right. He knew what was coming and tried to radio someone. According to the coroner, he died of a massive heart attack. Yes, he died doing what he lived for. Thank you so much for your kind words. Goodbye. Around 11 a.m., she removed the receiver from its hook, wrapped it in a dish towel, and placed it on a table near the phone. She pulled on a light sweater and painting apron and headed down the path. She picked up the pochade and placed the canvas properly in place. The windmill was still there. After scraping all the grass and debris from the canvas with a palette knife, she began to paint again. And I'm going to take a break right about now before I get into this, so stretch your legs, and I'll be back in a couple of minutes. During this break, I wish to ask for a donation of any amount to help me keep this podcast going. I'm fine with whatever you can afford, using whatever currency you want. I've set up a donation tab on the Crann Stories and Poetry webpage at rss.com and a donation page on my website at www.crannbeatha.com using PayPal for your security. Don't worry about the exchange rates, as PayPal takes care of that for us. If you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know in your social circles, as the writers I showcase in this podcast deserve all the exposure they can get. I created this podcast for them because I love to read their work, and I believe it should be shared with the whole world. Now, I want to explain how to find my website. Since this show is audio only, just write down the website name from the podcast image showing here and search for it. Visitors finding the website for the first time will reach the welcome page to learn a little bit about what's inside. You'll see the homepage link at the bottom of the page. Click on it if you wish to enter my world. Once on the homepage, you'll see the menu bar at the top where there are links to the pages in the website. Feel free to look around all you want. If you should happen to buy one of my books, all the better. Thank you for your support. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the break. So my third story is entitled Star-4488, in parentheses, Sol, S-O-L. Underneath says no landing on Terra. This is by Ulf Wolf, a Swedish writer, published in Writers Right Under the Moon. The teacher, Graydon Wall was his name, had recently arrived on planet Freyrus 558 from its near neighbor, Freyrus 557, to teach its young about their galaxy. Old and quite dignified, he was considered an expert on this part of the star system, and his move to Freyrus 558 had come as a well-deserved, if somewhat overdue, promotion. As a rule, he enjoyed teaching youngsters about the neighborhood, but today's subject lay well beyond his comfort zone. It had to be covered, of course. It existed, after all. It was a part of the galaxy, but the area was sensitive and not really suitable for young ears and minds. He launched the next holograph showing star 4488, also known as Sol, along with its planets, hoping that not too many questions about it would be hurled his way. The third planet out from star 4488 was called Terra. and that even in this educational holograph sported the ominous red dot that warned of danger or other unpleasant things. Warned of what, precisely, and why was the question he did not want to hear, much less answer. He hoped, somewhat beyond hope, that no one would notice. Just another planet circling another sun, going about its circling planetary business. Star 4488 is a sun of average size, perhaps even leaning towards large, he said, laser pointing at the star. It has an unusually strong gravitational pull for its size, holding even the farthest little planet, which is called Pluto, in its orbit. No response from the class. They knew all about gravity and planetary orbits. Then one hand rose. Yes? If star 4488's pull is unusually strong, how come the planets close to it have not been pulled in and absorbed? Gradenwald looked at the boy, then back at the holograph, then back at the boy again. They were. Long silence, wheels turning and turning in minds digesting his answer. Oh, yes, I see, said the owner of the raised, now lowered hand. A quick, embarrassed smile even. Some giggles among the young girls. Smiles among the boys. Another long silence. 42 pairs of eyes examined the holograph. Just another solar system. Nothing special here, except for that red dot. The second hand rose. Yes? Why does Terra, am I saying that right, have the danger sign? None of the others do. Oh my, he should have known. Here we go. Time to deflect. As you all know, some planets are not very conducive to life. Toxic gases, predators too ferocious to tame, too large to fight, or too fast to flee. Things like that. They normally warrant a red dot. And Terra, Gradenwald affected dullness badly. Yes, Terra. Why the danger sign for Terra? It looks innocuous enough. Could we have a closer view? Oh, sure. Gradenwald brought up a much enlarged version of Terra, a nice blue ball streaked with white weather systems. Innocuous indeed, said the now lowered second hand. He scrutinized the hologram with interest. Then he added, Why is there no tag by the danger sign? No explanation. The red dots usually come with a footnote of sorts telling us why. My question precisely, said the first raised hand, also curious now. A murmur of assent rippled through the class. Yes, why indeed? This was precisely where Gradenwald did not want to go. He looked at the two boys, eager and sure, confident in their respective wonderings. At the beginning of the semester, he had been introduced to all of them, and for a week or so even remembered all their names. But time being what time is, and age marching right along with it, his memory had begun leaking, and now he could not for the life of his remember the boys' names. I don't know, he lied. You don't know? The second hand dawned childish disbelief blazingly. A few snickers throughout, and two outright laughs from the back of the class. You're supposed to be the expert on these things. Yes, said the first hand. That's why I chose your class. Gradenwald looked from one boy to the other, then out over the whole class. He cleared his throat. I wish I could tell you, he said. I know the lie. He had suggested to the headmaster that the red dot be removed from Terra altogether, but had been refused. We don't display incomplete holographs, was the reply. Perhaps where you come from, but our standards are a little higher than that. There might be hard-to-answer questions, he replied. There had better not be, was the headmaster's answer. Wishful thinking. And here were the questions, and here he stood, the expert fool, buttoning down on the secret, but now playing with the idea of letting it out and into the ears of these cocky boys. Is it true, said a third boy, hand raised. The class went very quiet. Is what true? There is no landing on Terra? Where did you hear that? My dad once told me. As a surveyor, he once approached Terra for a closer look, carefully though, for he had been told specifically to keep a safe distance, and that he must not, under any circumstances, land. Your dad? And who might he be? Elaroon. You're Elaroon's son? Yes, sir, in the flesh. Giggles again. Oh, my lord, his luck, he sighed. He tossed around for some divine help or a solution of some kind, but none and nothing came to his aid. Then he heard himself say, All right, I will tell you. He would get in all kinds of trouble with the faculty and the headmaster for this, of course. But all these youngsters would be told eventually, so why not here and now? It was not a part of the fifth-year curriculum, to be sure. But what's to be done about that? He really had no choice now. He took a deep breath. A still lake of upturned faces awaited his next words, his explanation. Then he said, It is a prison planet. My next story is also a short one. It's entitled Her Orbs Averted, Memories of Teddy Bear, by David Pahor, published in the Fiction Writer's Den. She stands respectively to the rear of the bioengineered hydrangea viola bush, whose seeds were imported from Earth only 3 years ago, yet which already blooms to half her height beneath the luxuriant rays of her red-tinted star. Just one fruit of success in optimizing my husband's priorities. Marrying into this socially ascending Svensson family, which owns a quarter share in our colony's budding merchant fleet, was no mean achievement. Firstly, I impressed on him how our infant daughter would love a fitting home in a romantic, perfectly landscaped countryside beyond Lumpy Hill. He finally cleared the area of wild creatures, right by the just completed water canal with its bank-hugging footpaths, shaded bench alcoves with nighttime lighting and automatic parasols, and petite pavilions in 100 styles from all human worlds offered light refreshments and quaint holo music. Secondly, having secured the construction of our abode, I had to design and furnish its interior, and model the formal gardens behind the main building, choosing and arranging the position of the flowering bushes and shade-granting trees, all to represent the ultimate herbage from man's original world. She calls discreetly, interrupting my musings, and a flash of anger spikes through me. But I quiet it, reasoning that Nanny is only performing her job. I really have to talk with Doctor to replace my biotech formula, because the current shit is doing even less for my composure than the special tea did for Mother to alleviate jitters in the austere days before the colony bloomed. I asked her to meet me at sunset at the verdure border between our arboretum proper and the summer rotunda grounds. That was the perfect time after she had put my 5-year-old to bed, and John drove to his evening huddle at the spaceport with the other guys from the Mercantile Fellowship. "Why did you let her dig in the Zen garden?" I ask her. She hesitates as if struggling to formulate a concise answer. "When you commissioned my services, you explained that your daughter is fascinated by technology, and you want to nurture this inclination. Her wish to try out her new excavator toy overrode the prescription against disarraying the Crann. I took a deep breath, grappling afresh with the slippery tentacles of rising rage. "But why did you have to analyze the uncovered material and file a report?" The girl handled the objects before I could stop her. After taking her immediately back to the house, I had to ascertain the biohazard level to which she had been exposed. Fortunately, it was not significantly higher than that from the soil of our other botanical locations. "You may go now," I sighed, sensing the onset of my usual headache. The mechanoid nursemaid shifts the shimmering gaze of her pink orbs away from me, as if to diminish my perception of challenge, then speaks. Still, her words cut through my biotech composure like monofilament through a tree trunk. They remind me of Teddy Bear's voice that last time when my teenage hands manhandled him way down into a storage box, to be hopefully forgotten, as most childhood fads should be. Damn her Earth-manufactured arrogance. If I can venture a suggestion, kind mistress, would it not be best if the gardening droids relocated the bones of the planet's indigenous beings to a less frequented place? And my last for you guys is entitled A Dead Star with a Fragile Heart, stitched by unseen hands, a poem by H.R. Parker. The clouds above us, knitted with harmony, a never-ending tapestry, stitched by unseen hands and unseen hearts, who paint the dawn golden and the night in lapis. The moon rises, a rose-gold sentinel, standing watch over the heavens. I stand in awe below, longing to return to the cosmos, for I'm a dead star with a fragile heart who just wants to return home. So that's all I have for you for stories and poems this week. I hope you enjoyed everything. And I'll be back again next week with more stories and more poetry for everyone. With that, I'll leave you go, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Sláinte. Guramahagat. Thank you for listening to the show today. I hope you enjoyed the variety of stories and poems again this week. If you like the show, please like, subscribe, and reply, as this goes a long way towards reaching more listeners around the world. As a Shanké, I hope you will allow me to continue delighting you with a story or poem here under the crown of beatha. Maybe they will bring you a smile, take you away from your troubles for a time. As I say goodbye this week, I wish to leave you with this Irish blessing as you go about your day. May your path rise up to meet you, and the sun warm your bonnet as you walk down the lane to the pub. May your friends or relations bring you a pint after you retell these stories and poems I give you here. Slán go fóill. Goodbye for now.